So good to be with you. So good to see everybody today. I think it was about a year ago where we had to hit the pause button because our first day of school, which was slated to start around August 23rd, 24th, got pushed back to September 8th. If you'll recall, for those of you that have kiddos in school systems. The continuation of the work that's happening in Liberty Public Schools. Two things come to mind. It's partly developing a return to learn plan on what it looks like to navigate a pandemic. But then another parallel track to that is just continuing to do the work on behalf of, as Amy shared, nearly 13,000 students in Liberty Public Schools. As I shared, today was the first day, so you see a lot of pictures like this circulating on social media. You might see a few more masks than usual, and that we're masking up in our schools in an effort to try to do really do three things: keep kids and staff healthy and safe. Secondly, provide 5 days of learning as long as we possibly can to be able to have a school year. And then the last piece as it relates to close contact and contact tracing. That's really all I'm going to say about that. The rest of it has to do with the work that continues in effectuating our strategic plan. We're going to talk a lot about the information that's contained within these two pieces right here, as far as district information, numbers that you might be interested in hearing about, but then also shift to talking about some of the programs that we have in place across all of our campuses in service to our learners. As far as our demographic data, this is where we stand as of August 10th. If you'll navigate all the way to the bottom right-hand corner, 12,712 students, pre-K through grade 12. We anticipate that number going up ever so slightly, probably about 200 to 300 students, which then would put us right at 13,000, because at the early childhood level, a lot of kids age into our program as the year progresses. And so we end up adding about 250 to 300 students at our early childhood center by the time we conclude the school year in May. As it relates to all of our other campuses, you can see those populations. And if you look at the middle to high school level, once we hit this area right in here, about 6th grade on up, that's where you have your larger class sizes in Liberty Public Schools. That bubble has been kind of sitting at the middle level and moving into the high school level over the course of the last several years. That's an important piece to make note of, and that as we think about facilities master planning, long-term impact of growth, development going on and across our area, we have to ready for that at the middle level and at the high school level. Shift slightly down, pre-K through grades 12, you'll notice that those classes starting in kindergarten are a little bit smaller, and then you start seeing that uptick in and around 5th grade and 6th grade. We're going to talk a little bit more about demographics as it relates to our district, but real briefly, kind of going back to return to learn planning. Over the course of last year and this year, our team worked incredibly hard to be able to do several things, to be able to provide parents choice or options as it relates to how they wanted their children to learn. And really two paths, the first of which being fully face-to-face for elementary. We had to pivot to a hybrid model at the secondary level. Not an ideal situation, but a necessity nonetheless. By the end of last year, we were able to pull back to 4 days a week. Thinking about this school year starting today, we really have two options: fully face-to-face, 5 days a week, but then for those families for which it works best, we still are allowing that virtual option, and we think that that will be in place from this point moving forward. In total, last year we had about 2,500 students pre-K through grades 12 that learned full-time remotely or virtually from home, or from a national park for that matter. We had a lot of families that traveled and took advantage of that. This year, that number is down significantly to only about 350 students pre-K through grades 12. What that tells us is a desire to be back fully face-to-face as much as we can possibly be in a health and safe environment. All of our information regarding Return to Learn is contained within our district's webpage, so you can certainly access that there. What I'm most excited about are these next couple of slides, and to share a little bit, this is work that had happened prior to the pandemic beginning. It was at the conclusion of our previous strategic plan that we started to have conversations around what's next. We call it our edge of vision. So as we were working the previous strategic plan, as it was coming to a sunset or a close, we started talking about what is that then lies in front of us, or we call that edge of vision, and what do we need to ready ourselves for. Many of you participated in providing feedback on our strategic plan. around a question as it relates to what are those essential skills that our students need to be obtaining while they're in school, pre-K through 12, but then also ensure that they have in place once they graduate from high school. Those essential skills then populated what we're referring to as our graduate profile. This is this document on the right. The themes that surfaced in the feedback received from students, from parents, from family, community members, and businesses were really in the areas of academic skills, personal skills, entrepreneurial skills, professional skills, and then cultural skills. Each of those we have defined, but then underneath each of those categories, we list out what those essential skills are, whether it's to be a critical thinker, reflective, creative, collaborative, empathetic, the list goes on and on. The goal being that as students have learning experience at the elementary, the middle level, or the high school level, that they're able to apply their learning through real-world learning experiences. That happens with your partnership. Whether it's coming into an elementary classroom and creating a project for students to actually walk through and work through, that's a real-world learning project, or whether it's at the middle level and participating in a job fair, or whether it's at the high school hosting an intern. I know several of you have done that before. Or whether it's assisting with job interviews and just that preparation. Think of it this way. As a high school student sitting across a table from a prospective employer, that high school student can then now say, here are the experiences that I've had outside of the classroom. Here's how I've learned to work collaboratively. Here are my communication experiences. Here's how I've learned to be creative or to be an empathetic individual or a good listener, right? Similarly, along with that prospective employer, another student might be able to sit across the table from a college admissions counselor and have a very similar interview and conversation and say, here are the skills that I've developed while in high school, and here's why I want to pursue your institution. Go on a step farther. Another student might sit across the interview table from someone, let's say, that might be a military recruiter. In that conversation with that military recruiter, that student is able to relay as well, here are the essential skills that I've obtained while I'm in high school. Guess what? Those skills are valued across every single one of those sectors, be it higher education, be it the medical field, be it the armed services. That's our aim in delivering and effectuating a graduate profile for our students. Student walks across, they get their diploma in hand, but then they have a +1 experience, a market value asset like an internship, an entrepreneurial experience, a client-based project that they've worked on. We were talking about Northland CAPS earlier over at our table. What phenomenal experiences to equip our students with. That's the work of our graduate profile. Another piece is our vivid vision. Our vivid vision is a little bit different than a vision statement or a mission statement or a list of core values, and this was done intentionally. Instead, it focuses on the feedback that we got from our community around what are those major areas of focus for our school district, and they're listed off to the left. It's around learning, teaching, leadership, professional learning, which is the adults in our organization because we're constantly learning and growing. And then lastly, it's community. What we've tried to do is to paint the picture and tell the story, in that if what our community has set out for us, if we actually accomplish that, what will it look like? And the fact of the matter is, this is our attempt to tell that story through a narrative. So as we look out 2 to 3 to 4 years from now, if all of what we've identified in our action plans is accomplished, here's what it will look like to live, to learn in Liberty Public Schools. So we would encourage you to take a look at those items. They are on our district's website, certainly available to everyone to be able to look at. The strategic plan then comes about as a result of those 5 areas of focus. And these are the headers or the titles of all of our action plans that fall under the strategic plan. You'll notice the date of 2020-2021. Later this week, we have a strategic plan retreat in which we will gather together as a leadership team, identify these areas that we've accomplished, kind of fast forward and take a look at areas of future consideration that we want to bring to our strategic plan, present to our Board of Education later this fall for their consideration, because we want it to be not necessarily a 5-year or 10-year plan that sits on a shelf, but instead something that is more fluid, more flexible, that we can have pivot when we need to. We can be a little bit more agile in our approaches than than school districts typically are in around strategic planning. Ranging from competency-based learning to learner agency, equity is threaded throughout the strategic plan. You'll notice real-world learning. The community piece, we recognize we focused on college and career readiness over the last year or so. Colleen is here and does a phenomenal job for us in terms of our community outreach and helping navigate that within our community. More to be added to that community dynamic as it relates to engaging our community and ensuring that they have a voice at the table as well. Certainly glad to share any additional information as it relates to these areas. You can access this again on our district's webpage by looking at the Our District category and visiting strategic planning right there under who we are. To shift from this then to kind of some additional projects we're working on in our district. This one is always interesting. As we talk with people in the community, they want to know what's going on with our growth because they see rooftops and they see businesses and they hear of families moving to the community. And this is what it has looked like over the course of really the last 20 years. Every 3 years, we do a demographic study and look at our demographic projections. And that's about what our demographer will tell us. He'll tell us that the data that he delivers is really only as good as about 3 to 4 years out. You can see broken down by grade level where we've been and then certainly where we're at currently. Noticing specifically that 6th through 8th and then that 9th through 12th trajectory continues to climb. But then as that is climbing, you'll notice the K2 and the 3-5 starts to decline a little bit. That's that bubble transitioning from the elementary level on over to the middle level and onto the high school. So that gets us through 2020, 2021 as far as present day. We technically look at our numbers in September because that's when we report them to the state of Missouri and the Department of Education. We'll do that at the latter part of September and have a better count as it relates to our enrollment over the course of this year. A lot of districts, including those in the Northland, have plateaued, whereas other districts in and around the state of Missouri have even seen declines over the course of this last year and a half, navigating the pandemic. Additional information you might find interesting. These screenshots are from our demographic report, again available on our website, that give you a little bit of more detail than just that primary graphic. As you can see, the district boundary is in the green on the left-hand side, and then there are about 76 planning districts that we have in and around the entire school district boundary. Over on the right-hand side, each of those small white dots represents students in terms of their current students and their current residents. As you can see on the left-hand side, I-35 kind of walking through the middle. You have the saturation on the left in Kansas City, but then you also have the saturation on the right within Liberty, City of Liberty. And then as you get out into the outskirts, it's not very populated. That takes it to a step further where you can actually see the density or the concentration across the district. And you'll notice a lot of red and orange on that left-hand side. About 8 years ago when I came to the district, it was about 55% were students coming from the City of Liberty, and about 45% came from the City of Kansas City. That has since flipped, where the majority of our students actually come to us from the City of Kansas City, about 55, 60%, somewhere in there, the remaining percentage from the City of Liberty. So we continue to work with developers. We continue to watch residential development, both from single-family, multifamily, apartment complexes, in terms of the student yield and how that will impact us for years to come. Looking forward then, this is what it could look like from where we currently are, the start of the 21-22 school year. Although the demographer doesn't like to go out 10 years, they did, just for the sake of kicks and grins, I guess. But we really don't look much further than that 4 to 5 year mark in terms of thinking ahead, because in between that time, we'll do another demographic study to be able to see what's going on in our district. You can continue to see the middle level and the high school plateauing or going up just ever so slightly along with our other campuses. What that tells us, we may not have an immediate need for a new school, to where when we start our facilities master planning projects, it would be mostly around looking at renovations, perhaps additions here and there like we've done the last couple of years, or just looking at some of our maintenance projects that are higher needs as far as looking at our capital planning and capital projects. With that said, we had a couple of projects that we were concluding from our 2018 bond projects that were approved by our community. Most recently, we completed the Performing Arts Center at Liberty High School. A couple of actual completed pictures are over there on the right. I was there this morning, and it was great to see students coming in this entrance as a band and students and cheerleaders welcomed them for the start of the 21-22 school year. In addition, we had students, about 400, that were gathered in the auditorium for a back-to-school meeting. And so we're utilizing those spaces and certainly are appreciative of our community for allowing us to be able to do this at Liberty High School. Another project, if you are a Liberty High School grad, the iconic entrance has had a facelift. And so it looks like this now. Was there this morning as well. Once you enter into the building, we had some leaking at the very top of that roof, and so all of that's been replaced. And then if you may or may not recognize this, if you were to walk into the high school, say a year and a half ago, off to the side, this was the old theater. Over here is Coakley. All of that has been cleaned out and renovated for flexible space. Was there this morning, and one of our new micro schools is actually meeting in behind that space. As far as a new micro school focused on global learning and kind of a global project-based emphasis. Looking ahead then with those numbers and our demographic projections, we're going back to the drawing board as it relates to facility master planning and working with our architects, Hollis and Miller, to assess what our elementary campuses and our middle campuses and our high school campuses look like, where we may need to go in the future. The process that we follow is a five-step process. And it includes these areas. I want to talk about those briefly. We're really at this step 2, step 3 point in terms of collecting data and looking at planning criteria. This is a similar process to what we've used in the past. The very first step is really about pulling a team together and looking at stakeholder engagement, whether it's at the administrative level, the board level, all the way around to community leadership and input, building level teams, involving teachers and all of our support staff areas as well. We've initiated that in the last year or so. To skip through this, as far as collecting data, looking at facility assessments, gauging what every single campus needs are, and then identifying those as we move forward, focusing on curriculum, as far as the types of learning that will take place and teaching along with our strategic plan. A lot of this is in place, but then certainly areas that we want to be able to expand looking ahead. The planning criteria then comes together as far as what our priorities are. Our last 2018 bond issue, we really emphasized safety and security. This time we're looking at real world learning, operations, that community engagement piece. Virtual learning is something that we know is not going away. And we experienced quite a bit of that over the course of the pandemic this last year. All of that being said, it comes together in this train track model as we identify what our demographic projections look like and at what point we may need to consider purchasing land, adding an additional campus, or the interim in terms of those projects that we've identified as priorities that we need to focus in on, whether it's at that elementary, that middle, or that high school level. The very last piece then for our Board of Education to consider is out of all of the engagement, out of all the conversations, out of all the priorities, what do we want to consider and bring forward for our community to consider in an election? How does that play out from a bonded indebtedness piece? Is it a tax increase? Is it a no tax levy increase? And so we're at the early stages of this entire process, but wanted to tee that up for your all's awareness and continue to provide updates as we go. The last area that I wanted to mention this morning has everything to do with your opportunity to engage in the district through real-world learning, whether it's hosting a student in an internship experience or identifying a project that might be beneficial to you in your place of employment. This is a regional collaboration with the Kauffman Foundation and about 32 other districts in and around real-world learning. Real-world learning simply is defined as preparing students for the future of work by giving them real job exposure and learning opportunities to build those essential skills we talked about earlier, and inspire their unique path forward. It starts at the elementary level, where they perhaps are exploring, and then at the middle level, able to engage a little bit more with prospective areas, sectors, work experiences, and opportunities. And then it involves immersive experiences at the high school level, which we are calling market value assets. Be it a work experience, obtaining an industry recognized credential, looking at dual credit, college credit while in high school, or entrepreneurial experiences as well. That ties back to our graduate profile and the work of our strategic plan. This is just a regional profile that was developed with the help of the Kauffman Foundation that aligns well with the work that we're doing within our district and across the Northland. But across a 2-state area, you have about 30 districts that are covering about 6 counties whose number one goal is to create 100% of graduates who will have obtained at least one market value asset, believing that we will have graduates that contain multiple market value assets by the time they finish high school. Again, that idea that they graduate with their diploma in hand and a minimum of a +1 experience. This is the lay of the land as far as those districts and counties. If you pull all of that together, you have about 100,000 high school students. I know CarStar has had multiple students come through their place. I see Gerald in the back, and I know several others of you have as well. Appreciate the work that you've done. We have a lot of room to go, not just in our district, but to get to that 100,000 mark as far as students being afforded the opportunity to obtain that. This is our aim, or that goal, by 2030, that students across the region graduate with that MVA in place. That then serves as a bridge for whatever is next for them once they graduate high school. The last couple things would be, here's the role of the employer and the student, our faculty and staff surrounding and providing that connection to the world of work across a variety of sectors. And we already have those experiences showing up in Liberty Public Schools, whether it's project-based learning environments, whether it's Northland CAPS, our internship program through Network 53, our micro schools on the side, the Unschool Challenge at our alternative school that brings kind of a reverse internship model into play where businesses are coming on site and hosting an internship, or whether it's Kansas City Tech Academy in partnership with Magna. So I'll leave you with this and then open it up for questions. One of my favorite artists or design firms is a group by Gaping Void. And it simply says, make a connection. How can we connect with you all on behalf of your business, on behalf of your sector, but then more importantly from our view, on behalf of our nearly 13,000 students toward that aim of obtaining real-world learning experiences and effectuating that graduate profile. But thank you for the invitation to be here, and keep an eye on your inbox because things will continue to change and evolve as we continue to scenario plan and work through a lot of what-if questions. So good to see you all here this afternoon.